Hello, it's your favorite president telling Todd Huff listeners about MAGA Milk Protein Powder. That's what we're calling it, MAGA Milk. It's protein for patriots, okay? American-made MAGA Milk destroys dad bods and builds a big, beautiful wall of MAGA muscle on your entire body. So true. Don't buy protein made in China. You'll be a total disaster, a weak loser. Your workouts are winning. Drink MAGA Milk. Go to MAGAmuscle.com and put some Trump in your pump. MAGAmuscle.com.
Looking for a knife that's more than just metal? The Rainy Forge handcrafts blades in a real coal forge, the way they were meant to be made. Every knife is meticulously crafted, hair-popping sharp, and built to last a lifetime. From hunting to cooking, we've got a blade for you. Affordable heirloom quality. Visit therainyforgeblacksmith.com and click Buy a Knife to get started. The Rainy Forge, built with tradition, ready for your adventure.
Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, but Donald Trump and his executive branch, his administration, have aborted Planned Parenthood funding. My friends, Planned Parenthood should know that funding doesn't really begin until reception. And the real question is this: when is Planned Parenthood going to be viable? I want to talk briefly about, I've had a lot of fun with this morning. It's deserved, 100%, by the way. Want to get into that. Gavin Newsom, governor of the People's Republic of California, not too happy. I've got a lot of stuff I want to get to today. It's in the stack of stuff. You can see that, as always, on our website, toddhuffshow.com. It's called The Stack in honor of the late, great Rush Limbaugh. But I've got a lot that I want to get to, starting with this. We've got tariffs. We got all kinds of things. Retaliatory tariffs. We've got economy, news about jobs and the stock market and all this stuff going on out there. We're going to touch on as much of this as we can as we wrap up a very busy broadcast week. So before we do that, though, my friends, let me ask you, well, I know the answer to this. You care about this country, right? But you can't fight for this country if you're not taking care of yourself. That's why I've told you about Soul Tea. It's an all-natural, clinically proven, science has spoken on this, clinically proven way to lower cholesterol safely, no prescriptions, no doctor's visits, not that there's anything wrong with those things. But why start there when you can start with the natural, affordable method that's not a drug, that's worked, that shows that it works for people? So I take it. I think you should consider taking it as well. We need healthy, strong Americans, my friends. We are in one heck of a fight for this nation. We can't let high cholesterol slow us down. Go to Soltea.com, SOLTEA. That's the website where you can check out this product, get a 3-month supply, and you'll get a special. You'll save 50% off the first 3-month supply. It's very affordable. You'll get free shipping as well. Soltea.com. You got to use my name, Todd. I should tell you that part. Check out with promo code Todd during the checkout process, and you will get that discount and the free shipping. Soltea.com, SOLTEA, promo code Todd. All right, so Trump has aborted. Oh, I love this. He's aborted federal funding for Planned Parenthood in California. WokeSpy.com has Gavin Newsom's response to this. California Governor Gavin Newsom reacted angrily, shocking, to President Donald Trump shutting down federal funds that went to abortions provided by Planned Parenthood. In a press release, the abortion provider confirmed that 9 of its affiliates were informed that the Trump administration would temporarily withhold their Title X funding over possible violations of Trump's executive order. So Trump issued an executive order. Listen, these are the rules. It is interesting to me. We have had government that has been built at the hands of the lovers of big government for decades. They've put this monstrosity together. You have heard me. I don't like the way that this works. I wish that the federal government wasn't funding any of this stuff. Forget about the fact that it's immoral and wicked and evil, which is awful in and of itself. This whole system needs to be fixed. When this nation was founded, I've gone through this before. The federal government used to get its money from the states. And so based upon the size of the country, states would provide money, taxes, back to the federal government based upon their proportion. If you were 7% of the population of America, based upon the census, you would provide 7% of the funding required for the federal government. And so there's that obvious thing right there where there's now pressure. There's pressure on the government to keep costs down because you got to go back and tell the states, hey, this is your share of what we're spending here. And so, and there were tariffs and all this sort of stuff. But the bottom line is, tariffs is relevant to the conversation because of what's going on. But the bottom line is we didn't send all of our tax dollars as individual Americans to the federal government via the IRS. That didn't happen. That didn't happen until the past 100 years or so. We didn't have federal income tax. They had to amend the Constitution for this. They have built this brick by brick. And now, instead of states sending their share of federal expenses to the federal treasury, now the individuals pay a federal income tax, and then the federal government holds those funds, and they say, I tell you what, you want these funds? We'll tell you to jump, and you say how high. You follow our instructions and our narrative and our desires perfectly, you will get this. It's there for you to have. There's just some strings attached, right? This is one of the reasons why people like me are against the Department of Education and are pleased to see what's happening here. So this has been at their own creation. They've made this. The lovers of big government, which of course includes the Democrat Party, it includes many in the Republican Party, the rhinos, the establishment, and so forth. And it definitely includes the radical left. It includes the people at Planned Parenthood. They liked creating this scenario where they got federal taxpayer dollars. So Trump came in, and as the executive, he has some discretionary capabilities. He does have some oversight. And if you don't comply with his orders for what the funds are technically being used for, if it's being abused or they're being ignored or what have you, then he absolutely has every right under this messed up system to reduce or to say until you start complying with the order, you're not going to get this. That's what's happened here. So, going back to the article here, in a press release, the abortion provider confirmed that 9 of its affiliates were informed that the Trump administration would temporarily withhold their Title X funding over possible violation of Trump's executive orders. Newsom decried the order on social media. This is Gavin Newsom. Here's what his post on X said. Woke up this morning to the Trump administration freezing all of California's Title X funding. Title X provides basic reproductive care. Here we go. Like birth control, cancer screenings, STD testing. Well, it's a Republican-founded program Richard Nixon, of all people, established in 1970, writes Gavin Newsom on X. But his post on X doesn't stop there. This is just plain cruel, he writes. Trump administration, this is the article from Reuters, dated on April 1st, when Corey Spartacus Booker was up at the podium in the Senate, being a hero, showing the world what it takes to be a leader by talking a lot at the podium for what he would consider a filibuster, though it really wasn't because there was no legislation. But Booker's out there being a hero. Trump saying we're going to cut funding here until you comply with executive orders. So, that is a good thing. Now, I came up with 3 statements at the beginning that I used that I'm candidly a little happy with. I'm a little giddy. It was fun. Every once in a while, I'll write something down that I want to get to. So I said 3 things in the opening. I said Trump has aborted Planned Parenthood funding, which I think is very appropriate to say. I also asked this question: when is Planned Parenthood viable? Why do I say that? Well, because Planned Parenthood really began to thrive in the environment created by the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973 by the Supreme Court. That's when we had 9 old white men in black robes. We're told that we shouldn't let white men tell women what they can do with their bodies. That's precisely what happened in 1973 with the Roe decision. Those old white men, after telling women when they could terminate their pregnancies and so forth, they came up with this concept of fetal viability. When is the fetus viable? By the way, fetus means small child. So anytime that someone says it's not a baby, it's a fetus, it's like saying it's not a tomato, it's a tomato. These are, it is what it is. And the lengths to which, I watched this, and I know some of you don't like the abortion talk. You don't like it. Todd, let's worry about the economy. Let's worry about jobs. Yes, those things matter. But I don't know. I think even if you're just looking at the numbers, don't you think that having a healthy workforce in the future that's not decimated by abortion, you realize how the population is flat now here? If you take away illegal immigration, the number of people, our birth rate is effectively flat. It's not, we're not growing a lot because of the birth rate. If you don't think that'll have an impact on the economy, I don't know what to say about that. I think it's also a little bit naive to think that allowing our country to have such an evil ruling like we had with Roe versus Wade, where we have these conversations about whether a human being is actually a human being. I think that's terrible. I think it's terrible to be teaching those things in school. I don't care to talk about the issue, but to tell kids, as a matter of fact, that an unborn child in the womb is not a human being is scientifically false. So are you okay with science being lied about in the educational system? Do you not want employees in the future to be able to have a firm grasp of truth? Should we be cramming lies and other nonsense into their noggins? What does that do for the workforce? I mean, we already have these woke, just imagine, look at the woke crazies that are out there today and ask yourself, if we had a nation, if that was the workforce, would that be good for the economy? This country would completely collapse. There would be no new businesses. There would be no labor. This would be a country of protest and a country of entitlement, where we would be giving out handouts for everything, universal basic income, all of this stuff. Would that be good for the economy? These 2 things, to me, it's a disorder of the mind, but it's also a disorder of the heart, which I think is where most of these things start. It is evil. It can't be allowed to happen. And I don't think you can separate this issue, especially how the life of human beings, the value of life. Does that not impact other ways that we look at society, that we look at the elderly? If we can say people are too young to really be human, can we not say, are they too old to really be human? I got a million questions about this and reasons why I look at this with such importance. But at the top of that list is that God created us with certain unalienable rights, and that we don't have the right to terminate anyone's life. As I bump my camera here, we don't have the right to terminate anyone's life without a justification, like if they've committed a capital offense. Ironically, this is what the left and the people who are out there clamoring for abortion they're defending the people who have done something to justify capital punishment, but they are demanding that the innocent be slaughtered because, in the vast majority of cases, 95% plus, because of political or individual convenience, because of this desire to, I guess, to not have a child and just to terminate it. You're not ready. If you weren't ready, I know this makes me sound so old. If you weren't ready Why are you engaging in activities that could lead to this? Oh, that's so antiquated. Are they not educated? Do they not know where babies come from? This is what's said to me when I believe in things like the virgin birth. Do you not know where babies come from? Actually, I do. That's why I think the virgin birth is so amazing, because a baby was born without the traditional means by which a baby being born is based upon. So this issue is a big deal to our country. And so, but back to the Supreme Court. They came up, and this order has been overruled and so forth, this court case through Dobbs. But this question initially that the Supreme Court posed was, when is the fetus viable? The unborn child viable? When is the baby able to survive outside of the womb? That's what the basic question is. If it's dependent upon the mother for nutrition and for survival, then that's not fair to the mother. And so they say, well, the only way that we can really begin to say that child should have its own, I guess, a right to live is if it has reached the stage of viability. They came up with the trimesters, all of this stuff. And so now I think the shoe is on the other foot here. And so I posed the question to Planned Parenthood, when are you going to be viable? When are you going to be viable to not need the U.S. taxpayer to pay for your butchering of babies? When are you going to show that you're viable on your own? Don't be demanding that we fund this crap, this wicked depravity. The last question I asked, or the last statement I made off the top, was Planned Parenthood should know that funding begins at reception. I like this one, my friends, because life begins at conception. And everybody knows this. The lengths to which people will go, the mental jujitsu and gymnastics required to say that life does not begin at conception is remarkable to me. I've gone through this before. I'm going to do it again because it is so abundantly clear. Let him who has ears, hear this. This is the truth. So you have a man and a woman. Man, sperm cell, woman, egg cell. Turns out that's the way that it's always been. It's the way it's always going to be. That is baked into the way that we were created by our Creator. Sperm cell, living sperm cell, genetically the man, the male. Egg cell, genetically the female, a living cell. They combine. Now, that new life form, which is, again, the joining of two living cells, it doesn't die and then later come back to life. That would be remarkable. That's not what happens. It's egg cell, sperm cell, fertilization, cellular replication, all this stuff begins, and it begins the process. The coding is in there, which is mind-boggling, for a new human being. And no longer, this is the important point, genetically, it is 50% of each of the parents. It is not just the father. It is not just the mother. It is its own unique person, own unique DNA. Everything that will make that person what that person is. I mean, I'm not saying we certainly have choices. I mean, genetically, what's going to be the factors that contribute to our eye color, our height, all that stuff. Right? All those things are in there. Things that are genetically in us today as adults were in the meeting of the egg and the sperm cell. Science has since proven through studies, and none of us can argue with science, we know that. Science has spoken that when the egg and sperm cell meet, there is an explosion of light, which I find fascinating. An explosion of life. It begins the process. It has the criteria of what it means to be alive. Living things grow. Dead things. I mean, listen, you look at what is required for something to be called living, and that's what this thing is doing. Now, this may not be fully developed yet. Of course, it's not. But to say it's not a life and to say that it is not human requires the most incredible amount of, again, mental gymnastics that I have ever seen on display. For those who don't want to admit that it is a living being and that it is a human being, it is a desire of their heart, because it is the desire of their heart to not admit that because they want to have some moral authority to be able to terminate the life of that child. And what is the ultimate reason for wanting to terminate the child's life? It is for convenience. It is to be something that is a discretionary act. It's not because of the things that we're told about rape and incest and all this sort of stuff. Health of the baby. It's rarely about those things. Rarely. Almost never. Statistically, it's because the woman has decided, oftentimes coached by people pushing in this direction, that she's not ready, she's too young, she can't support the child, and so it's better to kill the child than to bring the child into the world that she can't provide for that child in. There's of course, many other alternatives, but none of that is really pressed. And so here we find ourselves having this discussion about the beginning of life. It's an effort in futility to try to convince the radical left that life begins at conception because they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe it. And what the mind will justify what the heart desires. That's what we have here. People want to be able to live a lifestyle that has no consequences for sexual activity, and they are prepared to justify that with the murdering of an unborn child. It is despicable. Now, listen, I know some people haven't really thought about it that way. I've got stories of having conversations. I just ran into a guy the other day who, he was always pro-life personally, but he said, look, I don't want to tell someone else what to do. And I'm like, well, are you okay with them knocking off their 2-year-old? Well, no. Well, why? Why not? Because it's a child. It's its own being. Exactly. Is it not its own being in the womb? I mean, why does location determine whether that's another an individual life? I mean, whether in the womb, I understand that it is different, but does it suddenly justify the location of that individual? Does that justify its being murdered, being killed, being terminated? Of course we have an interest. Government has an interest in protecting the lives of people under its authority. It's the very top of the list of legitimate purpose of government. And Planned Parenthood and everybody else knows that life begins at conception, and this little lack of funds coming their way, may I point out that funding begins at reception. And, you can have all the stuff written on paper, Planned Parenthood, that you want. You can wish it into being. You can demand it. But it turns out that the funding really isn't funding until there's that moment of reception, when the money hits the hands of the recipient, when the bank account of the recipient has said funds placed inside of them. Funding begins at reception, just like life begins at conception. And the only way to really stop the funding from getting there, it requires that the activities of sending the money be stopped. Just like if you don't want conception, you have to stop the activity that creates the conception, my friends. This is justice, by the way. Now, listen, I mean, this particular reason and rationale, it's going to be probably challenged. They can make changes to whether they're following Trump's orders and all this, maybe get this funding anyway. But the bottom line here, what I want to get to is, I think it's good that Planned Parenthood is learning what it really means to have their funding aborted, to be reminded that funding begins at reception, and they should spend some more time worrying not about whether or not a fetus, an unborn child, is viable, but rather maybe making their own organization viable, not requiring taxpayer dollars. I've got to take a break, my friends. Quick time out. You're listening to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I am your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute.
Shooters, hunters, and outdoor enthusiasts, Emax Tactical has you covered. We offer specialty, exotic, and vintage ammunition you won't find anywhere else. Plus, field medical kits and civilian legal training. Emax Tactical is passionate about helping customers find exactly what they need. 90% of orders go out the same day. Visit Emax Tactical online and use code TODD for 10% off your first order. Visit us at emaxtactical.com. EMACStactical.com.
At FurnitureMadeInUSA.com, we provide beautiful chairs, rockers, stools, and tables handcrafted by skilled American artisans in North Carolina since 1924. With every purchase, you're supporting American businesses, American workers, and their families. Don't just buy furniture, Invest in a piece of American history. Shop now at FurnitureMadeInUSA.com.
Seeking natural solutions for your health and wellness? Look no further than Garden Root Remedy. We offer handcrafted herbal tinctures, salves, teas, and more made with only the highest quality organic herbs. We provide personalized consultations to help you find the perfect herbal remedy for your specific needs. Experience the power of nature's healing touch. Visit Garden Root Remedy online at gardenrootremedy.com. That's gardenrootremedy.com. Rooted in nature, blooming with wellness.
Welcome back, my friends. So, I want to shift gears. I want to talk a little bit about the markets. I want to talk a little bit about tariffs. I want to talk a little bit about what we are now embarking upon in this global climate, global economic climate that Trump is trying to fix. Headline here at wallstreetjournal.com: Dow tumbles, bonds rally after China retaliates against Trump tariffs. You would have seen earlier this week, we talked about it. We didn't go through Trump's got a chart, right? It's showing tariff rates, and people say, wait a minute, those aren't actual tariff rates. Trump's actually, the math that they used is looking at the trade deficit between different nations and so forth. It's not just a current tariff rate, but Trump's basically saying, look, the United States, we went through this yesterday, I think, earlier this week. I don't know. Time flies when you're having fun. But we went through this, and I've actually talked about this long before Trump came onto the scene, years ago, probably certainly when Biden was in office, or maybe when Trump was in office the first time. Been doing this for almost 10 years now. So, but I remember saying that politicians like to kick the can down the road because what's required to fix the problem is going to result in short-term pain. And politicians don't want to own the short-term pain. I've made analogies before. This is like if you get a diagnosis for cancer or some disease and you have to make a decision to get treated, right? Or maybe you have a situation where you have to have a tumor removed or something like this. There might be short-term pain that's necessary for long-term healing. Think about it when you start a new diet. Those first few days, you can have headaches, you can have sugar withdrawals, you can have whatever, you can just be hungry. But over time, it's in your long-term best interest to address the problem. There's short-term pain, but if you stick with it for usually not nearly as long as you think, but sometimes it's not comfortable. It happens to take a little bit longer than you wish that it would. And so you do those things, you take the steps necessary, whether you work out, right? I remember the first few days after lifting weights, if you lift weights, or the first few days after running, you're going to be sore. You're going to think, if you're an older person like me, you're going to say, I didn't know I even had a muscle where I'm sore. I've never felt that muscle be sore in my life because you don't use some of the muscles you might have used when you were younger and more active or whatever. You lift weights and you're just sore. You can't move. It hurts to sit down. It's hard to get dressed and all this sort of stuff. Shoulders are sore, legs are sore, whatever. But again, if you stick with it and you do the routine and the regimen over time, those things pay off and it's better in the long term for your health. This has been the case. So forget about the specifics with tariffs. Forget about Donald Trump. Just when you acknowledge the problems that we have with America, how it's been mismanaged by the radical leftists, the lovers of big government, even the rhinos. Running out of room here. Even the rhinos have driven this nation, nose first, head first into the ground. And so because of the way that it works, because we have gotten accustomed to the government funding everything, because we've gotten accustomed to having the federal government having all sorts of programs and so forth for virtually everything under the sun, not everybody, but a lot of people are accustomed to getting something from the federal government. They'll justify it in their minds. And if they understand that the federal government can't provide everything, but they also don't want to, it's human nature, to let go of what they are getting from the federal government, right? It's we need to cut it, but we need to cut something else, right? We need to cut how much federal monies go to back to certain states, but let's not cut it to our state for our pet project because ours is different. There's an element of that. And so the first thing required is to get people to realize, look, the path we're on is leading us to a disastrous ultimate outcome. And it might be so far into the future that it's hard for the average person to see, to understand. But if I remember years ago, Rush talking about, I forget what happened. It was something economically. And he said, nothing is real. Nothing is real economically. We play these games where we act like, we can just take on this massive amount of debt. Under Biden, we had this massive amount of inflation. We acted like, those things are inconvenient, but we didn't see them for the catastrophic sort of events that they can be. These things can destroy, literally destroy and bring down governments, my friends, can make it impossible for people to live. And we've gotten close to that. We've had too much pressure put on the American taxpayer. And so the only way to quit it, or the only way to stop it, is to quit, I should say, feeding the beast. That's the only way to get there. And that part of the process is painful because it's a cold slap in the face from reality. Reality that we're kicking that can down the road, right? Just borrow a little extra money here. Pretend that problem doesn't exist there. That's tomorrow's problem. Kick the can down the road. Listen, some things are tomorrow's problem. I had someone tell me one time we were talking about something even within the what happens behind the scenes at this show. And he said to me, and he was right. He said, that's not today's problem. He's right. Not everything is today's problem, but I'll tell you this, some things are today's problem, and the things that are today's problem for far too long have been kicked down the road to the next generation, to the next group of politicians, to the next whatever. It's not, we don't want to deal with it now. It's somebody else's problem. It's $36 trillion of debt. Let's make it $50 trillion. Let's make it $100 trillion. Let's have unfunded liabilities into the quadrillions. I mean, this is the sort of mentality that's been running this country, and you can't think that you're going to truly fix it without that moment of difficulty, because the markets are built into what they see as the value of the short-term gains are how much of this game is going to continue. How much is the federal government going to continue to pump money into the economy that really shouldn't be pumped in there? Or how many more times are they going to ignore the problems that's being bore by the working class or by small businesses so that, they can protect the interest of corporate America? How many rules are we going to have that protects corporate America, that makes it harder for small businesses and entrepreneurs and working class people to compete with these folks? There's laws, there's bureaucracy, there's monetary policy, fiscal, just all this stuff. And until you stop all of it, that's how you stop the problem, is you stop all the nonsense. But that creates a period of time where it's like starting a new diet, starting a new workout, getting treatment for a disease. You might feel much worse before you ultimately, hopefully, get better. And that's where we are right now. And that's what we're experiencing out there. This is predictable, but it's what's in the short term. So in the short term, we're going to have to, just toughen up and be prepared for a little bit of unpredictability. But if we see this through, just like if we see the diet through, just like if we continue working out, these things will be better. Everything will even out, and they will improve. In fact, not just get back to where they were. We'll begin to see this country have more prosperity, have more opportunity, because the playing field, and that's what Trump's after here, making the playing field level with international commerce, importing, exporting, tariffs, trade deficits, all this. Let's play on a level playing field. And when we do, America won't be carrying the, excess amount of the burden. And that's what's been happening over the decades. So Trump's trying to fix that. There's going to be some short-term turmoil and some tension. Be ready for it, but brighter days are ahead. Friends, you've heard me talk about on this program now. We've started a membership community. It's called the Inner Circle. You can become a founding member of the Inner Circle where you'll get bonus content, where you'll get access to behind-the-scenes stuff, video chats, all sorts of things that we are preparing to do. It's going to launch later this spring, but we're looking for founding members who want to be a part of that from day one, shape it, mold it, help us to make it something that helps us as conservatives be better and not bitter. So a $99 investment, that'll get you a lifetime membership. For as long as you're here and as long as the program is running, you will be a member. $99 one time, that's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You'll be a founding member, and you'll be able to help us shape and mold and form this inner circle into something that is helpful and productive, that gives us a mechanism by which it's not just intellectual discussion and understanding on the radio or on podcast. We have the ability to do more behind the scenes, affect the way that we communicate about conservatism, persuade others to become conservatives, look at the ways that we can impact our local politics, all that sort of stuff. So you can text JOIN to 317-210-2830, 317-210-2830, text the word JOIN, or go to the website, toddhuffshow.com/join. Again, that's toddhuffshow.com/join. I'm out of time in this segment. Quick time out, my friends. You're listening here to Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I am your host, Todd Huff, back here in just a minute.
Shooters, hunters, and outdoor enthusiasts, Emax Tactical has you covered. We offer specialty, exotic, and vintage ammunition you won't find anywhere else. Plus, field medical kits and civilian legal training. Emax Tactical is passionate about helping customers find exactly what they need. 90% of orders go out the same day. Visit Emax Tactical online and use code TODD for 10% off your first order. Visit us at emaxtactical.com. EMACStactical.com.
Hello, it's your favorite president telling Todd Huff listeners about MAGA Milk Protein Powder. That's what we're calling it, MAGA Milk. It's protein for patriots, okay? American-made MAGA milk destroys dad bods and builds a big, beautiful wall of MAGA muscle on your entire body. So true. Don't buy protein made in China. You'll be a total disaster, a weak loser. Your workouts are winning. Drink MAGA milk. Go to MAGAmuscle.com and put some Trump in your pump. MAGAmuscle.com.
Take the guesswork out of gourmet. Playhouse Spices gives you a leg-up weapon in the kitchen. Playhouse Spices elevates your cooking with gourmet, handcrafted blends made with clean, healthy ingredients. Explore exciting flavors and become a masterful home chef. Visit PlayhouseSpices.com and use code TODD for 20% off your first order over $50. Playhouse Spices. Seek, explore, taste. That's PlayhouseSpices.com.
Welcome back, my friends. Some of you might have a hard time believing what I just was saying there. Some of you might think, well, Todd, that all sounds well and good. I watch the value of my 401k, my pension, my Roth, whatever, my stock portfolio go down the drain. I understand that. I am sympathetic to that. But I'll tell you something else to think about is if the way that we had been operating, the SOP, the standard operating procedure, the status quo, which is the government is basically propping some of this stuff up by creating a scenario where they're spending more money than they should. That in and of itself, right? When people see that the amount of spending by the federal government is going to go down, in the long term, everybody understands that that's a healthy thing. But in the short term, people begin to think, well, what's that mean for, how much economic activity there's going to be? Because the government's a big part of that. They take everybody's money. They pay administrative fees to people that work there, just the cost of doing business, exorbitant amounts of fees. And then they will spend money. People will have contracts with the federal government and, we'll start having Sesame Street in Baghdad or whatever. So this, it upsets the apple cart. It's change, and uncertainty comes with change. But if we can get back to the point, and I don't know how far we can get if I'm being candid. I don't know if we can get back to the point where the government, I'm more optimistic now than I've probably ever been, but where the government is involved in as little as possible. The less that the government is doing, the more freedom and opportunity you have, the more money you have, the more choices you can make. The smaller the government is, the less intrusive it is, the less bureaucratic it is. Those things lead to more choices. Those choices can lead more to prosperity. You are better at determining your own fate, your own future, than the federal government is, than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. But some people have lived a life that is so insulated from the tip of that spear, so insulated from being out there on the spear tip of capitalism, of entrepreneurism, or whatever. They get comfortable. They get comfortable with all of the ways that things are. Well, things will be good in my life. That reminds me, there's a story in the Bible, I forget which king it is, but one of the kings was told that bad things were coming in the future, and basically, the Old Testament king, he said, it's going to be good in my days. And in a sense, again, there's always multiple ways of interpreting things, but in a sense, it almost left me with the feeling of, well, that's not my problem. It's going to be okay for my life. Whatever happens after that is going to happen. And I think that there's a certain amount of that when we have comfort. When we have comfort, we're willing to give up other things. A lot of people are anyway. I'm not, but a lot of people are willing to give up a lot of things to maintain that comfort. Even things that people like me would think, wow, I can't believe you're willing to give up that level of freedom and opportunity to pursue your dreams, live your life for some promise that the government can never guarantee you, maybe for a short term. But the more of this systematic big government living, and the more of even outside of that, the more that we, the United States of America, bear the excessive burden of protecting everybody, paying for everything, again, being the world's police force, being the group responsible for providing all sorts of things. It's unsustainable in the long term. And when you combine that with the uncertainty that comes, or the unfairness, I should say, that comes from some of these negotiated trade deals, these one-way tariffs and all of that, it's not fair to the American business. It's not good for the American worker. And so the only way to fix it is to go through and basically rip that Band-Aid off and demand that we are going to force a period of adjustments here. If you want to continue doing business with the United States, you need to be fair about it. If you're only looking out for your best interest, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the left doesn't like this concept of America first, but they're okay with all these other countries putting themselves first when negotiating these trade deals with us, having tariffs, but not wanting tariffs applied in return, having these massive trade deficits because of all sorts of factors that oftentimes are controlled by governing forces, governing entities. Trump says we're going to just drop our shoulder here and march ahead. Right? It's like a fullback if you watch football. Back in the days where they had fullbacks. Fullbacks are rare today, but fullback was the lead blocker for the tailback. And when I was younger, and the tailback, the running back, would follow the fullback into the hole. The fullback would hit the first thing of the other team's color. Whatever, if you're playing a red team, the first thing that they saw red flashing into that hole, they would smash it, allowing the running back, the guy with the ball, to get out of the way. We're going to have to do that here for the short period of time. There's going to be some uncertainty. The market's going to be all over the place, but in the long term, if we stick with this, good things will come because it's going to be better in the long term, healthier for the American economy as we laid out. Got to go though, my friends. SDG.
At FurnitureMadeInUSA.com, we provide beautiful chairs, rockers, stools, and tables handcrafted by skilled American artisans in North Carolina since 1924. With every purchase, you're supporting American businesses, American workers, and their families. Don't just buy furniture, invest in a piece of American history. Shop now at FurnitureMadeInUSA.com.
Seeking natural solutions for your health and wellness? Look no further than Garden Root Remedy. We offer handcrafted herbal tinctures, salves, teas, and more made with only the highest quality organic herbs. We provide personalized consultations to help you find the perfect herbal remedy for your specific needs. Experience the power of nature's healing touch. Visit Garden Root Remedy online at gardenrootremedy.com. That's gardenrootremedy.com. Rooted in nature, blooming with wellness.